The sun beat down on the streets of Pine Ridge as 18-year-old Amara Taylor hurried along the busy sidewalk. It was just past 3 in the afternoon, and she was running a little late for her volunteer shift at the neighborhood community center. The kids would be waiting for her to help with their homework. Amara had spent extra time after class talking to her history teacher about a college recommendation letter. She was proud of her grades and community work, things her dad always said were the building blocks of a bright future. She smoothed down her navy blue skirt that fell just below her knees and adjusted the straps of her backpack, which was heavy with textbooks and art supplies for the children's program. Almost there, she whispered to herself, picking up her pace. She'd worn her favorite university sweatshirt today despite the heat, a birthday gift from her father that she treasured. It reminded her of her dreams. She'd be the first in her family to attend college next fall if all went according to plan. 2 blocks from the community center, Amara noticed a police cruiser slowly rolling alongside the curb. She didn't think much of it at first. Police were common in this part of town. Officer Thomas Walsh and his partner, Officer Greg Peterson, had been circling the area all afternoon following reports of teenagers selling drugs near the public library. "There's another one," Officer Peterson said, nodding toward Amara as she quickened her steps. "Keeps fidgeting with that bag." Officer Walsh squinted through the windshield. "Yeah, and look at how she sped up when she spotted us. Might be carrying something." They pulled the cruiser to the curb about 20 feet ahead of Amara and stepped out, positioning themselves directly in her path. Amara's heart skipped a beat, but she kept walking. She had nothing to hide. "Excuse me, miss," Officer Peterson called out, his hand resting casually on his belt. "We need to speak with you for a moment." Amara stopped, clutching the straps of her backpack tighter. "Is something wrong, officer?" "ID, please," Officer Peterson said, extending his hand without answering her question. "May I ask why you're stopping me?" Amara's voice was steady but quiet. Her father had taught her to always be respectful, but to know her rights. "I'm just heading to my volunteer job at the community center." Officer Walsh stepped closer. "We've had reports of drug activity in this area. You seem nervous and you're carrying a large bag." "I'm not nervous, sir. I'm late for my shift, that's all." Amara reached for her wallet in her jacket pocket, but the sudden movement made Officer Peterson step forward. "Whoa, whoa, hands where we can see them," he barked. Amara froze, her heart hammering in her chest. Across the street, a woman with a stroller slowed down, watching. A man sitting at a bus stop pulled out his phone. "I was just getting my ID," Amara explained, her voice beginning to shake. "It's in my pocket." "We've heard all kinds of excuses today," Officer Walsh said. "Turn around, hands against the wall." "But I didn't do anything wrong," Amara protested, still not moving. Officer Peterson grabbed her arm and turned her toward the building wall. "When an officer gives you an order, you comply, simple as that." By now, several people had stopped to watch. A man across the street had his phone held up, clearly recording. "Check the bag," Officer Walsh instructed his partner. Officer Peterson unzipped Amara's backpack and began roughly pulling out textbooks, notebooks, and colored markers for the children's art project, dropping several items onto the sidewalk. "Nothing here," he muttered, sounding almost disappointed. Amara felt tears welling in her eyes but fought to hold them back. "I told you, I'm just going to volunteer with kids." Officer Walsh was not satisfied. She could have it on her person. These kids get creative with hiding spots. "I don't have anything." Amara's voice rose. "You can't just search me like this." "Actually, we can," Officer Peterson said. "Turn around." When Amara turned, Peterson noticed something that looked like a small bulge beneath her skirt near her. "Waistband, what's that?" he demanded, pointing. "What's what?" Amara looked down, confused. "Don't play dumb." Without warning, Officer Peterson reached forward and tugged at the waistband of her skirt, pulling it outward to look inside. Amara cried out in shock and embarrassment, trying to step away but finding herself trapped against the wall. "Stop. That's my insulin pump. I'm diabetic." The small medical device was attached at her waistband, partially hidden under her sweatshirt. "Yeah, right," Officer Walsh scoffed. "Never heard that one before." As Officer Peterson continued his inappropriate search, pulling Amara's skirt in a way that exposed her undergarments to the growing crowd of onlookers, She finally shouted something in desperation. "My father is Mayor Taylor. Call him right now." Both officers laughed. "Sure he is," Officer Walsh said dismissively. "And I'm the governor's brother." A woman stepped forward from the crowd. "I'm recording all of this. You can't treat her this way." More phones were out now. Someone in the crowd called out, "That actually looks like the mayor's kid." Amara, humiliated and shaking, repeated herself. "My name is Amara Taylor. My father is Mayor Robert Taylor. Call it in if you don't believe me." Officer Peterson rolled his eyes and roughly pulled Amara's student ID from her wallet. He stared at it for a long moment, his expression slowly changing as realization dawned. "Walsh," he said quietly, showing his partner the ID. "We might have a problem here." The name on the ID matched what she'd said, Amara Taylor, the daughter of Pine Ridge's first black mayor. But the damage was already done. Videos were already being shared. And Amara Taylor stood against the wall, her belongings scattered on the ground, her dignity in shreds, and her eyes filled with tears that spoke of an injustice all too familiar in Pine Ridge. The crowd on the sidewalk had grown to nearly 30 people. Many had their phones out recording everything. Someone had started a live stream on social media, and viewers were quickly recognizing Amara as the mayor's daughter. Officer Walsh grabbed the student ID from his partner's hand and stared at it, his face growing pale. "Get dispatch on the line now." While Officer Peterson called in to verify Amara's identity, Walsh noticed the hostile murmurs rippling through the crowd. He tried to shift to damage control mode. "Miss, please calm down. We're just doing our job," he said, his tone suddenly softer. "There's been drug activity reported in this area." Amara stared at him, tears streaming down her face, but her voice was surprisingly steady. "So you pull up my skirt? In public? Because I'm walking to volunteer with children?" A middle-aged woman stepped forward from the crowd. "I've got the whole thing on video, honey. From the moment they stopped you. Don't worry." Officer Peterson returned from the cruiser, his expression grim. "It's confirmed. She's the mayor's daughter." The change in the officers was immediate and striking. Officer Walsh quickly bent down to gather Amara's scattered belongings, stuffing them awkwardly back into her backpack. "Miss Taylor, we sincerely apologize for the misunderstanding," he said loudly enough for the crowd to hear. "We had reports of someone matching your description in the area." Amara took her backpack but stepped away when Walsh tried to hand it to her. Her hands were shaking too badly to reach for it. The woman who had been recording came forward and took the bag for her. "I'm calling my dad now," Amara said, her voice cracking as she pulled out her phone. Officer Peterson moved closer, lowering his voice. "Miss Taylor, there's no need to involve the mayor. We can drive you wherever you need to go. No harm done, right?" A man from the crowd called out. "No harm? You humiliated this girl in public. We all saw what you did." More voices joined in. The crowd was getting angrier. Someone shouted about racial profiling. Another person demanded the officers' badge numbers. Amara's phone call connected. "Dad," she said, her voice finally breaking. "Dad, I need you. I'm on Oak Street near the community center. The police, She couldn't finish her sentence. "Officer," Walsh tried to take control of the situation. "Everyone needs to disperse. This is police business." "Not anymore, it isn't," said a deep voice from the edge of the crowd. The people parted as Mayor Robert Taylor pushed through, still wearing his suit from City Hall. He was a tall man with graying hair at his temples and the kind of presence that commanded attention without raising his voice. The look on his face when he saw his daughter, tear-streaked and huddled against the building wall, would be described later in social media posts as the calm before the storm. Mayor Taylor walked directly to Amara and put his arm around her shoulders. "Are you hurt?" he asked quietly. She shook her head but couldn't speak. Only then did the mayor turn to face the officers who were now standing stiffly at attention. "Your names and badge numbers," he said, his voice level but cold. "Mayor Taylor, sir." "Officer," Walsh began. There was a misunderstanding. "Your names and badge numbers," the mayor repeated, cutting him off. The officers complied. The mayor pulled out his own phone and made a call. "Chief Williams?" Robert Taylor. I'm standing on Oak Street with two of your officers who just publicly humiliated my daughter by forcibly pulling up her skirt during a search with no probable cause. Yes. I'll wait. The uncomfortable silence stretched for what felt like hours but was probably only 2 minutes. The crowd remained, watching and recording. Some had recognized the mayor and were whispering to each other. A news van pulled up at the end of the block, someone in the crowd having tipped them off. When Mayor Taylor finally spoke again, it was to the officers. Chief Williams would like you both back at the station, immediately. Your shift is over. Officer Peterson started to object. Sir, with all due respect, your shift is over, the mayor repeated, his voice unchanged but somehow more powerful. The officers looked at each other, then reluctantly headed toward their cruiser. As they walked away, the crowd parted silently, many still recording. Only when the police car pulled away did Mayor Taylor's professional facade crack slightly. He hugged his daughter tightly. I'm so sorry this happened to you, baby girl. They wouldn't listen to me, Amara whispered. They just wouldn't listen. The mayor looked around at the crowd, noticing the news crew setting up. Let's get you home. As they walked toward the mayor's car, people reached out to offer words of support to Amara. The woman who had recorded everything pressed a business card into the mayor's hand. I have the whole thing, Mr. Mayor. Every second. Call me if you need the footage. By the time they reached home, the videos were already spreading across social media. Justice for Amara was trending locally. The mayor's phone wouldn't stop ringing. Inside their modest 2-story house, the same house they'd lived in before Robert Taylor became mayor, Amara sat at the kitchen table, hands wrapped around a mug of tea her father had made. I didn't do anything wrong, she said quietly. I was just walking. The mayor sat across from her, still in his suit but with his tie loosened. I know, sweetheart. This happens to people all the time, doesn't it? Amara looked up at her father. People who aren't the mayor's daughter. Before he could answer, the doorbell rang. Through the front window, they could see the police chief's car in the driveway. Chief Lisa Williams stood on the porch, still in uniform but without her hat. Her face was grim. Robert, she said when the mayor opened the door. I just watched the footage. All of it. I came to speak with both of you. Mayor Taylor stepped aside to let her in. She's in the kitchen. As the police chief and the mayor walked through the living room, the television showed cell phone footage of what had happened. Someone had sent it to the local news. Chief Williams paused, watching the screen. She saw her officers pull at Amara's skirt, saw the girl's humiliation, heard the laughter and dismissal when she identified herself. The chief closed her eyes briefly. This changes everything, she said quietly. And in that moment, in a kitchen in Pine Ridge, the three of them, a shaken teenage girl, her father the mayor, and a police chief facing her department's darkest moment, understood that tomorrow would be very different from today. Morning sunlight streamed through the windows of Pine Ridge City Hall, but the atmosphere inside the mayor's office was anything but bright. Mayor Robert Taylor had been up most of the night, watching the videos of his daughter's humiliation spread across social media like wildfire. Justice for Amara had become the top trending topic in the state. He straightened his tie and glanced at his reflection in the glass door of a bookcase. The man looking back at him seemed older than yesterday. His phone buzzed for perhaps the 100th time that morning, another news outlet requesting a statement. You don't have to do this today, said his assistant Diane, standing in the doorway with a stack of papers. We could postpone the press conference. No, the mayor replied firmly. This can't wait. His phone buzzed again. This time it was a text from Amara. I'm on my way. Love you, Dad. The mayor smiled despite everything. His daughter had surprised him last night when she'd insisted on standing beside him at today's press conference. If it were someone else's daughter, she'd said, someone without your protection, nobody would hear their story. I need to be there. 20 minutes later, the press room was packed beyond capacity. News cameras lined the back wall. Local community leaders stood shoulder to shoulder with concerned citizens. Social media influencers were live streaming everything on their phones. The side door opened, and Mayor Taylor walked in with Amara beside him. She wore a simple blue dress and kept her eyes forward, her back straight. When someone from the crowd called out, "We stand with you, Amara," she managed a small smile. Police Chief Williams entered from the other side, taking her place at the podium. She looked directly at the cameras and began without preamble. Yesterday afternoon, 2 officers from the Pine Ridge Police Department stopped a young woman walking to her volunteer job. That young woman was Amara Taylor, daughter of Mayor Robert Taylor. The officers subjected Ms. Taylor to a humiliating public search with no probable cause. I have reviewed the body cam footage as well as videos taken by witnesses. The officers' conduct was unacceptable, inappropriate, and against department policy. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. No one had expected the chief to be so direct. Effective. Immediately, Officers Thomas Walsh and Gregory Peterson have been placed on administrative leave pending a full investigation. But I want to be clear about something. The chief paused, her gaze sweeping the room. This is not about one incident or 2 officers. This is about patterns of behavior that we cannot ignore any longer. She stepped aside, and Mayor Taylor took her place at the podium. Amara stood slightly behind him, her hands clasped in front of her. "Thank you all for coming," the mayor began, his deep voice steady. "I stand before you today not as your mayor, but as a father whose child was hurt." He turned slightly to look at Amara, then back to the crowd. "What happened to my daughter yesterday happens to countless young people of color in our city who don't have the protection that comes with being the mayor's child." A chorus of "That's right" echoed from the back of the room. For them, there are no press conferences. For them, there are no swift consequences for the officers involved. For them, this is just another Tuesday in Pine Ridge. The mayor's voice grew stronger. Today, that changes. Mayor Taylor then outlined a series of immediate actions: an independent review of all stop-and-search protocols, mandatory retraining for all officers, and the formation of a civilian oversight committee with real power. But policy changes are not enough, he continued. We need to change the culture, and that starts with listening to the voices that have been ignored for too long. He turned and gestured to Amara, who stepped forward to stand beside him. The room fell completely silent. "My name is Amara Taylor," she began, her voice quiet, but clear. "Yesterday I was walking to the community center where I volunteer with children after school. I was stopped by 2 police officers who treated me like a criminal for simply existing in my own neighborhood." Amara described the incident in her own words, her voice sometimes faltering but never stopping. When she described how the officer had pulled at her skirt, revealing her underwear to strangers on the street, several people in the audience wiped away tears. "I kept telling them who I was, but they wouldn't listen. They laughed." Amara took a deep breath. "The only reason I'm standing here today is because I'm the mayor's daughter. But what about all the other girls who look like me? Who speaks for them?" As she stepped back, the room erupted in applause. A woman near the front stood up, raising her hand until the mayor acknowledged her. Ms. Denise Washington, Pine Ridge Community Action Network, the mayor said, recognizing a longtime community activist. "We've been trying to talk to this city about police harassment for years," Denise said, her voice carrying across the room without a microphone. "Will you finally listen to us now?" The mayor and police chief exchanged a glance. Then, to everyone's surprise, Chief Williams stepped forward. "Yes, Ms. Washington, my office door is open to you this afternoon, if you're available." There was a moment of stunned silence, then more applause. After the press conference, as reporters shouted questions and cameras flashed, Amara slipped away through a side door. Her father found her in an empty corridor, leaning against the wall, with her eyes closed. "You were so brave in there," he said gently. Amara opened her eyes. "Do you think anything will really change?" Before he could answer, his phone rang. It was the governor's office. "Robert? I just watched your press conference. This needs to be more than just a Pine Ridge conversation. We need to talk statewide reform." Mayor Taylor looked at his daughter, who was watching him carefully. "I think," he said into the phone, but really to Amara, "this might be the beginning of real change." As they walked out of City Hall, dozens of teenagers from Amara's school were gathered on the steps, holding handmade signs that read, I am Amara, and listen to us. One girl stepped forward and handed Amara a marker. Will you sign my poster? Amara looked at the sign, which showed a silhouette of a girl standing tall with the words, "Dignity is our right," beneath it. As she signed her name, Amara realized something important. Her painful experience was becoming something larger than herself. It was becoming a movement. 2 weeks had passed since the incident that changed Pine Ridge forever. The city council chamber was packed for the emergency session called to address police reform. People stood along the walls, sat on the floor, and spilled out into the hallway. Amara sat in the front row, flanked by her friends from school. She'd been quiet these past weeks, processing what happened to her. The nightmares had started to fade, but she still felt her heart race whenever she saw a police car. The Body Cam Footage Review Committee has made its decision, announced Councilwoman Patel, her voice somber. After careful consideration, we have voted unanimously to release the footage to the public. A murmur ran through the crowd. Mayor Taylor, seated at the center of the council table, nodded gravely. Before we proceed, he said, I want to acknowledge that my daughter, who is directly affected by this decision, has given her consent for this release. Amara believes, as I do, that transparency is essential for healing and change. All eyes turned to Amara, who sat a little straighter but kept her gaze fixed on her hands in her lap. The lights dimmed and the footage began to play on the large screen at the front of the room. Unlike the cell phone videos that had captured parts of the incident, this footage showed everything that happened before the officers approached Amara, including their conversation in the patrol car. Check out the girl with the backpack, Officer Peterson's voice came through clearly. Bet she's carrying. Based on what? Officer Walsh asked. The camera showed Amara walking, adjusting her backpack strap. Just a feeling, Peterson replied. Plus, you know, they're always up to something in this neighborhood. A collective intake of breath filled the room at the casual prejudice in the officer's tone. The footage continued, showing the full encounter from the officer's perspective. When it reached the part where Officer Peterson pulled at Amara's skirt, several people looked away. Amara herself closed her eyes. But it was what came after, what hadn't been captured on the bystanders' videos, that caused the real uproar. As the officers returned to their cruiser after the mayor arrived, their conversation was still being recorded. Can you believe our luck? Peterson muttered. Of all the people to stop, we get the mayor's kid. This is going to be a nightmare, Walsh replied. But hey, she did look suspicious. Yeah, they all do, Peterson laughed. Not our fault she was in the wrong neighborhood. The mayor shut off the video. The silence in the room was deafening. Chief Williams stood up, her face tight with controlled anger. I've seen enough. The officer's own words make it clear this was not a mistake or a misunderstanding. This was a pattern of behavior. She turned to face the crowd. As of this morning, Officer Gregory Peterson has been terminated from the Pine Ridge Police Department. Officer Thomas Walsh has been demoted and will undergo extensive retraining. The announcement was met with mixed reactions. Some applause, some calls that the punishment wasn't enough. Denise Washington from the Community Action Network stood up. Firing one officer doesn't fix a broken system. We need to talk about the numbers. Chief Williams nodded and clicked to a new slide on the screen. The statistics were shocking. Black residents of Pine Ridge were 7 times more likely to be stopped and searched than white residents, despite contraband being found less frequently. I requested this data analysis last week, the chief explained. What it shows is unacceptable. This isn't about 2 officers. This is about policies and practices that have been in place for decades. For the next hour, community members took turns speaking. Some shared their own experiences with police harassment. Others proposed solutions. The meeting that was scheduled for 2 hours stretched to 4. Amara had remained quiet throughout, but as the discussion began to wind down, she raised her hand. The room immediately fell silent. I've been thinking a lot about what happened to me, she began, standing slowly. At first I just wanted to forget it, but then I realized something important. She looked around the room, making eye contact with several people. If this hadn't happened to the mayor's daughter, if it had happened to any other black girl in Pine Ridge, we wouldn't be here today talking about change. Nods and murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. So I decided to do something. Amara continued, gaining confidence. With help from my friends, I created an app. She held up her phone and the screen was projected onto the wall. It showed a simple interface titled, Know Your Rights. This app helps people understand what police can and cannot legally do during a stop. It records interactions and automatically uploads the video to secure cloud storage. And it has a panic button that sends your location to emergency contacts. The room was completely silent as Amara demonstrated how the app worked. My friends and I have also started a program at school to document police interactions in our community. We're gathering real stories, real data. Because if we want things to change, we need proof of what's happening. When she sat down, the applause was thunderous. As the meeting finally adjourned, a tall man approached Amara, Anthony Chen, a local tech entrepreneur. That app you created, he said. It could help a lot of people beyond Pine Ridge. Would you be interested in developing it further? I have resources I could contribute. Before Amara could answer, another voice joined the conversation. I'd like to help too. Amara turned to find herself face to face with Officer Walsh, the same officer who had stood by while his partner humiliated her. Because I was wrong, he said simply. I've spent 2 weeks thinking about what I did and what I didn't do when I should have. I can't change that day, but maybe I can help change what happens next. Amara studied his face, looking for insincerity, but finding none. There's a community meeting at the library tomorrow, she said finally. If you're serious, you can start by listening. As she walked away with her friends, Amara felt something she hadn't experienced since the incident, a sense of power. Her pain was being transformed into purpose. That night, as news of Amara's app spread across social media, her phone lit up with messages from teenagers in other cities asking how they could create similar programs in their communities. The story that had begun with humiliation was becoming a blueprint for change. The autumn leaves crunched under Amara's feet as she walked up the steps of Pine Ridge City Hall. 1 year had passed since that awful day when 2 police officers had pulled up her skirt on a public street. 1 year that had changed everything. For her, for Pine Ridge, and for many cities beyond. Ready for this? Asked her father, Mayor Taylor, holding the door open for her. Amara nodded, smoothing down her blazer. At 19, she carried herself with a confidence that hadn't been there before. The past year had been difficult, but it had also revealed strengths she hadn't known she possessed. Today was the official opening of the new Public Safety and Community Justice Center, a project that had grown directly from the reforms sparked by her experience. The modern glass building stood where an old police substation had once been, symbolizing the transformation underway in Pine Ridge. Inside, the atrium was already filled with people. Community members chatted with uniformed officers. Teenagers from Amara's Know Your Rights program handed out information packets. Local business owners who had helped fund the center mingled with visitors from neighboring cities who had come to learn from Pine Ridge's example. There she is, called out Denise Washington from the Community Action Network, waving Amara over. The woman of the hour. Amara smiled, but shook her head. This isn't about me. It's about all of us. Her eyes scanned the crowd and landed on a familiar face. Officer Walsh, now Sergeant Walsh, talking with a group of new police recruits. He caught her eye and nodded respectfully. Their relationship had evolved into an unexpected working partnership over the past year, as Walsh had become one of the strongest advocates for change within the department. Almost time, said Chief Williams, approaching with a tablet in hand. The governor just arrived. The ceremony began with Mayor Taylor welcoming everyone to what he called a new chapter in the history of Pine Ridge. He spoke about the changes of the past year, new search and seizure policies, mandatory bias training for all officers, and most importantly, the Civilian Oversight Board with real enforcement power. But policies on paper mean nothing without changes in hearts and actions, he said, gesturing to the crowd. That's why this center exists, not just as a building, but as a bridge between law enforcement and the community they serve. When It was Amara's turn to speak. A hush fell over the room. So many people knew her story, had seen the videos, had followed her journey from victim to activist. A year ago, I was just a high school student walking to my volunteer job, she began, her voice clear and steady. I never asked to become the face of police reform. I never wanted to be known for having my privacy violated on a public street. She paused, looking around the room. But sometimes life gives you moments that define you, not because of what happens to you, but because of what you choose to do afterward. Amara talked about the app she had created, which had now been downloaded more than 50,000 times and had been adapted for use in cities across the country. She spoke about the youth council she had helped form, which met regularly with police leadership to address concerns before they became crises. The numbers tell an important story, she continued, clicking to a slide that showed statistics. Stop and search incidents in Pine Ridge have decreased by 78% in the past year. But here's what matters more. Solving actual crimes has increased by 23%. Applause broke out at this revelation. When police spend less time harassing innocent people and more time building real relationships in the community, everyone is safer. When officers are trained to see people as individuals rather than stereotypes, everyone is treated with more dignity. As Amara concluded her speech, she noticed someone standing at the back of the room, a face she hadn't expected to see. Former Officer Peterson, who had been fired after the incident, was watching quietly. Their eyes met briefly and he gave a small nod before slipping out a side door. After the ceremony, as people toured the new facility, Amara found a quiet corner to catch her breath. The emotions of the day had been overwhelming. "You did good, kid," said a voice behind her. It was Anthony Chen, the tech entrepreneur who had helped develop her app into a professional platform. "Your story has changed lives." "I hope so," Amara replied. "Sometimes I still can't believe all this started with something so awful." "That's often how change works," Anthony said. "The most painful moments can become the most powerful catalysts." As they talked, a group of young teens from the community center where Amara used to volunteer approached hesitantly. "Miss Amara?" said one girl about 14 years old. "We're doing a school project on community heroes. Would you talk to us about what you did?" Amara smiled. "I'm happy to talk, but I'm not a hero. I'm just someone who decided that what happened to me shouldn't happen to anyone else." Later that evening, as the event wound down, Sergeant Walsh approached Amara and her father. The former partners in the incident had taken different paths. Walsh toward reform from within, Peterson toward a life away from law enforcement. "I wanted to thank you," Walsh said to Amara. "Not many people would have allowed someone who hurt them to be part of making things better." "People can change," Amara replied simply. "That's the whole point of everything we've done here." And they walked toward the exit. Mayor Taylor put his arm around his daughter's shoulders. "You know what I'm most proud of?" he said quietly. "Not the building, not the reforms, not even getting re-elected on a platform of police accountability." "What then?" Amara asked. "The way you turned pain into purpose, the way you refused to let that day define you as a victim." Outside, the evening sky was turning purple with sunset. A group of community members and officers were planting a garden together in the center's courtyard, a small but powerful symbol of the new relationship being built in Pine Ridge. Amara watched them, for a moment, remembering the frightened girl she had been a year ago, humiliated on a public street. That girl could never have imagined standing here now, seeing her painful experience transformed into positive change that reached far beyond her own life. As she joined the gardening group, kneeling to plant a young oak sapling, Amara thought about the roots growing unseen beneath the surface and the strength that often comes from the deepest wounds. "This one will be here for generations," said an elderly community member, patting the soil around the sapling. "Yes," Amara agreed, looking at the tiny tree that would someday grow tall and strong. "That's the whole point.